Hello and welcome back to another Freeformers Unplugged with Toby and Emily here live on LinkedIn. And if you're listening on demand through Spotify or your chosen podcast platform, welcome back to your earbuds. Emily, hello, happy Friday. How are you?
Happy Friday. I am all good. I love springtime. I can see blossom out the window. I can see birds in the garden. I just find it like really lifts me this time of year. So yeah, I'm doing pretty well.
Did you not have a storm last night? Was that just in the east of
No,
England?
we did have a storm last night, but it seems to have blown itself away. It just kind of decapitated some daffodils, um, and blew over some bins.
Wow, and therein lies for particularly our American listeners. If you want to know the brutality of a British storm, it blows the heads off daffodils, and your garbage cans get blown over. Well, there we go. What are we going to be talking about today? Because I can't see. Freeformers Unplugged. Induction and onboarding is a lie, which is a fairly provocative title to say it's a lie. We're accusing a whole industry of being a lie.
I wonder who wrote that title, Toby.
You got to get the. It's clickbait. What is it? Rage bait. Rage bait is what we called. It's rage bait. But I think there's an element of truth to it. I think there's an element of truth that whilst the concept I'd say of induction onboarding isn't a lie, what people deliver and call it induction onboarding, I'd probably say is a lie. You're telling yourself that it's the thing that people need at that moment in time. And I think the thing we always say is that if you're delivering it for the organization's benefit and not the benefit of the individual, then you're probably delivering in part the wrong thing because it has to be a balance of both. What's your hot take on the spicy, provocative title that we've come up with today? I've come up with, as you've just said.
Every time you do one of these, I do kind of roll my eyes a little bit. My spicy hot take is that induction and onboarding just rolls off the tongue. We don't think everybody has a different definition of what induction and onboarding is, and they kind of just roll into one. Like, is induction something different for onboarding? Is onboarding your first week? Is it your first 90 days? I remember when we did a lot of benchmarking data a couple of years ago, we were really trying to define what an onboarding process is, and there is just no standard at all. I went through lots of data that was available at the time. Onboarding can be anything from 2 days, which, okay, at least it's 2 days, I guess, 2 days, to some people it was 6 months. Some people even classified it the full 12 months. Your first year was kind of like you've got the stabilizers on, I guess. The support there. So kind of that first year, that was quite rare. I would say that the majority of people consider onboarding to be certainly between 1 and 3 months. So there's that. Induction maybe is used more in different industries perhaps, so but there's no like real like absolute everybody knows exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about this period. It's just the thing that happens when somebody starts, and I think it's a very important thing that needs to happen. You need to have a way of helping the person who's just starting adapt to your company, understand what it is they're supposed to be doing. But you and I both know that often employee onboarding is the thing that maybe a new HR director or a new chief people officer comes in. It's like, right, I want to make my stamp. I want to prove that I'm serious. I want to make this my department. And then they tend to do like one of two things, right? Something along the lines of leadership behaviors or management behaviors or general people behaviors or induction and onboarding. And so sometimes the motivations for doing an onboarding program may not always be, as you alluded to earlier, with the individual who's starting at the heart of it.
Oh, I think there's a lot to unpack there in the opening monologue that you've delivered already. Which thread do I pull out first? I think let's roll it back to the beginning, like because we kind of skirted around it. Like, how would you, regardless of other people's interpretations, define, let's say, induction first? What would you define as induction?
So that's really interesting. So we don't have an induction type thing. I think induction is if you are working more in the type of industry where you've got a lot of machinery to understand, you've got a very formal induction process. There's perhaps some training you need to complete that is mandatory, and I don't just mean like health and safety and that kind of thing. also stuff like we've done some work with a care home recently, and if you're starting there, then you have a lot of things that you have to do before you can be let loose. They have a very formal induction process. That's because they regulatorily is not a word. It's because they have to do things for regulatory purposes. I think that's more of an induction, like a very, very set, this is your first week, you have to do this. It doesn't have to be a week. This is your first whatever period. You have to do this. And then I think onboarding is the more gradual kind of tails off as you go on. So I think it should be 90 days at least that you should have something in place for people, tailing off the kind of the support maybe that you're offering them, but checking in, making sure that they have what it is they need, because there's a lot of, she says, there's a lot of statistics, none of which I can quote off the top of my head, about how important belonging is. And we know that this onboarding period is a really important time to get people to feel like they belong, to get people to feel like it's working for them. So that I think is the key difference between induction and onboarding.
So induction then, because care home client that you mentioned, also when I did some work with a contact center, they weren't allowed to be on the phones until they'd done the six weeks of induction training. And so in that regard, with both of those things that we mentioned, this is the stuff you have to do before you can even start doing the job, regardless of, even in most cases, if you've done it before, because there is that regulatory stuff that you have to do. You said it right the second time. You did say it, like, I don't know how you said it the first, regulatory,
Regulatorily, I think.
that something like that. So there's that element is you have to do this before you can start doing your job. Now, if I think of some other induction programs I've done in not so you said kind of mechanical, right? The it's actually, oh, you just work in an office. It's the half a day, 2 hour, 1 day, 2 day session you get before you start your job. The key difference there being, because it isn't necessarily mandatory, it tends to happen whenever it happens, right? So ordinarily, that thing, that event has been designed for your first day. Every large organization I've worked with, it's like it can happen anywhere in the first 2 weeks, or anywhere in the first 3 months, or anywhere in the. I bumped into a guy at a client of ours a couple of weeks ago, and it's like, oh, you're doing the induction onboarding, great. Like, how long have you been here? And he said 6 months. But I've got to do this, so I have to be here. And you're like, well, at this point, that induction product that you're delivering to your employees ceases probably to be any use to that individual, other than, did they do it? Yes. Great. And I think there was only 2 people on that session as well. So you're like, well, was that session designed to be delivered to 2 people or 12 people, and all of these kind of things? So again, the design of induction, the design and delivery of an induction tends to fit the needs of the person who's designing and delivering it, rather than the needs of the end user. Um, and then the onboarding one's quite interesting, because when does onboarding even start? I'll leave that one. We'll come back to that one, because we talked about when it ends, but when does it start? For me, I think I've used this one a lot, is the end of the probation period, because there is a moment in time. There's a performance measure there from either party about whether the relationship continues. Um, because to be fully onboarded to an organization, you kind of have to have passed probation, because you're in the zone of least risk then. I'm not saying you're completely de-risked, but actually you formally, you know, I don't know, when you first get a job, you've started going out with someone, you're dating, and then you've passed probation, you're married, you're legally locked in. I know you're legally locked in before that, but you're legally locked in. We've committed to each other. We've put a probationary ring on our little fingers, and
Lovely.
now we're married until we decided to get divorced. Um, and so, and I think that's where it comes in, right? Is what is the performance measure of onboarding? Because many will kind of quote it as speed to competency. Um,
Impossible to measure. Not impossible, very challenging to measure in an awful lot of industries.
yeah, and yes, and so the performance measure is really, do the organization, the individual, accept that this relationship is going to work? Is it an equitable, mutually beneficial relationship? Go back to my previous point then. When does onboarding start?
So when we talk about the employee experience lifecycle, or the employee experience funnel, onboarding really starts at the point that you have signed your contract. I think that's when you go from a candidate experience to an employee experience. So therefore, if you're in the employee experience, therefore that's when your onboarding starts. Do you remember ages ago, like 2 years ago, before we had an awful lot of work, we sat down and we talked about the ideal employee journey, like what you would do beforehand?
Yeah.
Because not many companies do this. I have had one when I worked for the warehouse group in New Zealand. I would say that manager, she was fantastic. It was a very short turnaround time between my interview and starting. I think it was 2 weeks, but she checked in with me twice, like once on 1 week, once on the other week. I got stuff to read. There was no pressure to read it, but it was there if I wanted to read it. And she invited me for a coffee to the office after I'd had the thing, just to have a conversation, just to check that I was happy. And again, there was no pressure. I didn't have to do it, but I was nice and local, so of course I went. I didn't have anything better to do. So I think that it's what are those touch points that you can have to make someone's first day less scary? Because let's face it, we all have first day of school vibes on a new role, a new job, don't we? Because it is scary because you want to make a good impression. You don't really know what you're doing. You don't really know what to expect because, yes, everything that's happened in the interview has led you to believe something, but then it's how does that reality match up to your expectations? Or it's not even your expectations, it's what's been presented to you.
Hmm. And I think there's that. Okay, let's look at the needs of both the organization and the user at that point. So you've kind of talked a lot about a user needs, the anxiety, the uncomfort of going somewhere on the first day, all of that kind of stuff. But from an organization perspective, you kind of go, well, and I don't think this necessarily rings true. It's like, well, they're not really being paid to work for us then, so we can't give them anything to do because that's not fair because we're asking them to do stuff off the clock, as it were, which I think generally doesn't actually, the end user doesn't mind because the end user has that excitement, that anticipation. They want to feel as comfortable as possible going into a company. And so, therefore, I don't think the user minds. I think the organization minds that it might be asking someone to do something out of work hours. Um, and then I think the other thing that I was going to say that has immediately left my head is, well, there's two stories. There's two stories that I think we've talked about on this live stream before. So I'll rattle through them very quickly. The one where a mutual acquaintance of ours, they wanted to test the journey from Brighton to an office. And they thought, oh, when I get to the office, I'll have a coffee with one of the team, and I'll turn up, and everyone will be there. And the organisation was quite small, so they got the train, they got a Boris bike all the way to the office, only to find that lock on door, padlocked, no one in, and then they just went home. And you're just like, actually, as a design point, for a lot of people, just doing the commute is a really important thing before your first day, but also when you get there, making sure someone's there. And I think the other story is the welcome lounge, as they called it at my beloved previous employer, O2, who had this quite a nice, like, I was like, wow, I've never seen this before. Logged into the welcome lounge. You're a new starter. We know you can't access all the things that you would do when you're here, but actually, here's some of the stuff you can look at before you get here, before your contract officially starts. And I got a lovely tour of the office by Ronan. I'll always remember Ronan because when I got there on my first day, turns out Ronan had not been there for 6 months. This was the CEO that was on the
Oh,
portal.
you
Yeah,
have told me that before, but that bit had escaped my memory. Wow.
his name was Ronan. A lovely chap. I knew where his desk was and all sorts through this guided tour, and it turns out it's Mark. And I was like, oh, okay, fair enough. What happened to Ronan? No one told me.
We don't talk
Um,
about Ronan.
but all of that stuff is happening before, right? There is experience design happening there. And so when you particularly when you use the term induction, you're kind of disregarding anything that happens before and anything that happens after. So therefore, in some industries it can be quite a redundant thought process unless you've got this is the stuff you have to be able to do or have gone through before you're even legally allowed to start doing the actual job. Like, but before I started having a job, induction was always the thing that frat boys and rugby boys would do to get people to join your cult. I guess it was. There would be the induction process. All the films I'd watched and everything taught me that that's what an induction was. You get someone to do some crazy thing, and then you're part of the fraternity or the rugby club. I've never done one because I'm not that way
American.
inclined. But that and so there is this like ritualistic one of us thing, as well as the functional stuff. And then onboarding. I think onboarding we're probably a bit more well defined from contract signed for me to when your probation ends, but also when are you embedded, and when do you belong? When do you belong to the organization in the nice way, not the ownership
When
way?
do you feel like you belong rather than
That's
when do they
that's
own you?
that's the right phrasing. Thank you. Hmm. Okay, so where do we take it? So I think, well, let's go back a few steps. And why did I come up with the title in the first place? I guess because I, in my career, have done so many projects that have been called induction and onboarding projects, or induction projects, or onboarding projects. I've always done it, and the last time I did it before starting Freeformers was applying human-centered design to the process, which I think we've again talked about many times. Is, for us, one of the best ways to design your employee experience. The amount of user journey mapping, personas, and insight that we got from that process taught me that a 2-hour webinar on someone's first day was going to have very, very little impact on the organization. Yet the organization really wanted a 2-hour webinar for people's first day. And so it's kind of that, it's kind of something. Again, we talk a lot about this. It's on the tick box. It's on the checklist of things you have to do as a HR team to be seen to be functioning well. Is you have a good induction experience. Yes, but I think onboarding is way more important than induction. What do you think?
I agree. I think back to, but I think it's also important to be consistent. So coming back to the warehouse group in New Zealand, I had a really good feeling before I started. And then my first day, what did I do? I think I started later than everybody else, which is a good point. So they're all kind of, nobody's like, I'm not just hanging around. Met the team again. And the only other thing I really remember doing was explore the file system. I
Yep.
remember all afternoon exploring the file system because whilst my manager was very much a people, like I think she was human centered in her approach and her thinking, but there was no like structure and process there to onboard or induct me on that day. It was actually something that we then worked on, and I would say fell into the trap of making I wasn't actually working on it, I will just say. But the team was making it and fell into the trap of being very much about what did they need to know about us. I remember there's a lot of stuff about the story of the warehouse group and all the different brands because it's a very established brand in New Zealand. I know that means very little to people over here. But like if you think of like, I don't know, WH Smith or Woolworths or like one that's been around that's iconic, that's got a long history.
Or TJ Jones,
I know Woolworths doesn't exist anymore in the UK and TG Jones, isn't it, rather
TG
than
Jones.
TJ Jones. I just so the thing is I can't even remember. That's how
Well,
poor
it's
let's not
TK.
get side.
The thing I'll get in sidetracked with is TK Maxx in the UK, and then I think it's TJ Maxx in the States. I think
I
that's the
think it's
identical.
TG. Why would it? It's definitely TG Jones. Yeah,
Yeah, you
not
wouldn't have
T.
double J, would you? That
No,
wouldn't
you
make
wouldn't.
sense when you're
Um.
creating this fake name.
So anyway, it was a lot about the kind of the company, and then there was like a little bit of stuff on this is our values and these kind of things, but like precious little, I think, about the thinking about the person. It wasn't a human-centered process at all. It was very much a what do we need to tell them so that they can mold to us, which obviously didn't really have any impact at all. It looked nice. There was an interactive map of New Zealand. There was a little kiwi traveling around. Yeah, kind of cool, but like ultimately kind of pointless.
When you say there's a little Kiwi traveling around,
Yeah, kiwi. Oh, come on. Like New Zealand kiwi. Like
no, I
so
know.
you're kiwi bird, not a kiwi fruit.
I'm just
Okay. In New Zealand, a kiwi fruit is called a kiwi fruit always, and a kiwi is a kiwi bird or a kiwi like a New Zealander. But I mean the kiwi bird.
And out of those three, it was the bird. It wasn't a person or a piece of fruit going around this interactive map. I think the important thing on this live stream is we always clear up the hard hitting things that need clearing up, and we've just done that. And so I think we've talked about values and stuff. I think before, right? That the values are living, breathing things. They're not things that are just written down. And go, oh, they're the values. Cool. I'll start acting that way then. Like that's not how human behavior works. So to expect anything in induction to kind of go, oh, okay, now I live and breathe the values of Chi Jones because I've had this 2-hour webinar is not going to happen, right? But the other thing that you mentioned there is that assimilating yourself to the organization, and this is the thing that baffles me every single time. You have gone out through an attraction and recruitment process to get a person who is the very, very best person for that job, and all of it, and you wouldn't hire them if they weren't great, I don't think. And then you put them in the role, and all of a sudden they are incapable of doing their job. Why are they incapable of doing a job? Because the environment you've put them in. Who owns the environment? The organization. So in that situation, what should you be doing? You either change the environment to suit the individual, probably not fair because there's a load of other people working there and you can't do that. You can do some, but not all. But then there is that, how do we get this very successful person to be at their very best within this organization? That's generally not how induction onboarding is designed. It's designed to, hey, you remember all that stuff you saw on our careers page? Well, this is it. This is what we're listing. Here's all your L&D opportunities. Here's all this is the CEO who isn't the CEO, yada yada yada.
So, and I think here we've got a big difference between a big enterprise organization and a small organization. In a smaller or even a medium-sized organization, it's about people, it's about relationships. It will be about the manager and the role that they have. Depending on the size of the organization, you'll have other senior leadership people involved as well. If you're very small, obviously, of course, you will. The bigger you get, the less likely you are. Whereas when you get to like enterprise, it's always centrally managed. And I suppose this is important in a way because if it's not centrally managed, people end up with a horrendously inconsistent experience. But at the same time, I think that central management needs to enable managers to be able to get that person up to speed because they are the people ultimately who are going to have a big impact on a new starter is the managers and the other people around them. So if you can enable a manager taking a human-centered design approach and making it all about relationships and what this person means, how can you enable a manager to have the time and the space to be able to do this, to get this person up to speed, rather than just sticking them through a 2-hour this is our values workshop?
And I think the crux, we had this conversation with a client the other day.
Mm.
Like, you want to do induction onboarding? Why? Oh, because it's not consistent. Ah, is that a problem? Is that a problem that it's not consistent? What issues is the inconsistency causing you? And they're like, oh, we don't really know. We just know that everyone does it slightly differently. Now, the point you raise there is that if you then put that obligation on the manager, go back to what I said. The thing you're doing is putting a potentially highly successful person in an environment where they can't be highly successful. So, who probably has the most impact on the environment that individual works in? The manager. Now, yes, there are software and platforms and processes that might be kind of dictated by people other than the manager, but the manager's probably going to have the most of that impact. So in that world, it makes sense, but it also makes sense that it's not consistent either. There is benefit in the inconsistency. Now, I'll give you an example because I worked in an organization, a retailer with about 30,000 people, and we did exactly this. We gave the induction over to the managers of each store and said, "You do it." Like, you know exactly how you operate the store, who the people are, and there are all these nuances that you have. Where the fire exits are, you know way better than an e-learning module. So you hand it over. But what you have to be able to do, it's about empowerment, right? It's not delegation. So
Mm.
if it's about delegation, go, hey, all managers look after the inductions now. There you go. That's not fair because what does that mean? I'm a manager of a sales team or a finance department or whatever. I don't really know what that even means. Whereas if you then empower them, give them the stuff. Sorry, give them the stuff to be able to deliver an onboarding experience that brings in their own context and brings in, talking to the end user and delivering what they need, then that's a really good world. However, if you try and strive for consistency, you can't. That's really difficult. You've got to relinquish some control, which HR and people teams don't like doing. What did we do? We're potentially doing a project in a couple of weeks, and it's using the concept of social media influencers to create community and social learning culture in an organization. And someone popped their head up and goes, well, how do comms manage this? And I was like, well, the answer is they don't. And I think that's the thing, is like, well, I need to be able to see that I am moderating or managing this activity. And that usually is probably the biggest inhibitor to a lot of things L&D and HR do.
So in order to, you need some level of consistency.
Oh,
There's no
for
point
sure.
one person, you know, training you up for a completely different company. Like obviously that wouldn't happen, but that's what just came to my head. Someone saying like, "Oh, you started working at Curry's. Actually, I'm going to train you up to work at McDonald's." Like that would just be pointless and not helpful and not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
But so I think it's an element of what are the non-negotiables, what are the things that have to happen,
Yeah.
and there is some compliance stuff that we all acknowledge is not the best thing in the world that we love doing, but it has to happen, and there's reasons why certain compliance things have to happen, right?
Like signing terms and conditions before you play Call of Duty or do a software update on your mobile phone. You just acknowledge that they're a thing. Yes, sorry.
They're a thing. Yeah. I think in terms of enabling a manager to do it, it's also about protecting the space for them to be able to do it. So I'm thinking less about stores now where managers have more autonomy, like a store manager has quite a lot of autonomy about how they organize their time. I'm thinking more office space for a moment, where you find yourself pulled into so many meetings and you don't really have the time. Oh, okay. Sidebar, sorry. Somebody in my family, they're going through a round of redundancies at their workplace. They've made all of their managers redundant, basically. They're He was like, "Who's my new manager?" This is one of my cousins. He was like, "Who's my new manager?" And they said, "Oh, this person. She will have 150 direct reports by Monday." I know, I know. And then you don't know what's even funnier. In a month's time, she'll have another 100 or so just added to her. We worked it out. 150. I know. No, no. If she did nothing else, if she did absolutely nothing else, you could all have 15 minutes with her once a week or an hour once a month.
You'd already done the math, of course.
We've
Yeah,
already done the math.
I
No,
was
I
just trying
know,
to
I
do
know,
it right now.
I know, because but she could do absolutely nothing else. Like she could even have lunch. She can go to the loo. Like that's it.
That's
150
insane.
direct reports. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like my cousin was asking because he was like, "I don't know how to handle this situation. You've got experience in HR. How do I handle this particular thing that I'm in right now?" I was like, "Well, talk to your manager about how you do it." He's like, "Yeah, problem with that."
I've pulled a ticket out of the machine. I'm 121st in the list. I have to
Yeah,
wait for
exactly. I'll be
my
seen in
allocated 15 minutes.
August.
Yeah, that's that's great. I know. Future topic for a live stream: how many direct reports should a manager have?
I don't think
Again,
that's the whole topic. The answer is about 10, right? Like somewhere between 6 and 12.
well, we
10.
worked with an organisation recently. It was 1 to 4, which I was like, wow, that's
Yeah.
good. That was the average, right?
But I'll tell you what, it's not. It is not 150.
That's impossible. We're really all about kind of a flat hierarchy here, and it's like that is probably as flat as you can get. 150 people into one.
It's just because they made all their managers redundant. They're actually very
Just
hierarchical still. I know, it's
imagine how
ludicrous.
much scrolling you'd have to do on the on the org chart to kind of go, who's in my team? Swipe, 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 swipe. That is the worst PDF ever.
So obviously they're
Mm,
not doing any onboarding because they've just made a load of people redundant. But at some point they will be doing some more onboarding
yeah.
in that they will have some more managers because obviously that is completely unsustainable. But I don't know what they're doing. Like my cousin didn't know, to be honest. But like to go into the coming back to what we were talking about in enabling a manager to do that. Well, obviously that manager is not enabled in any way to be there for any of her team, but especially not anybody who's starting new. So
Mm,
if you're going to relinquish some kind of control, you also have to think about all these other things as well. Like yes, manager span, or span of control, whatever it's called. Um, and how do you give them the time and the space to be able to do it? And then how do you tie that into their performance metrics? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what people deliver against, right? They deliver against their performance metrics, if assuming they have them, because the performance metrics are the things that's going to enable them to demonstrate this is why I deserve a raise, this is why I deserve a promotion. And so if you can put something about people and team and onboarding and all of that in there, then it's going to be a priority of theirs, I think.
mm. So we talk about the consistency and how you deliver that consistency, or an consistent experience is probably where you want to get to. Now,
Well, no, outcomes. Sorry for a second. But like whenever we do this with training, it's about outcome, right? Like what are you trying to achieve? And whenever we do a train the trainer type thing, having just done one recently, I've done loads. We always have these are the key points, these are the outcomes you have to hit. How you get that, I don't really care. There's a suggested way you could do it if you're not feeling imaginative or confident, but bring in your own stories, bring in your own ways, adapt it to the situation, the people you've got in the room, but hit these points and make sure this outcome is what gets across. I think it's the same thing.
Oh, now there are many tangents going off in my head. I think the first one is that having an individual or a single department look after it is one of the worst things you can do, because everything that we've just described requires so many different moving parts. And the worst induction onboarding projects I've been on have been, a centrally managed HR project, essentially, or an L&D project, and they don't involve IT, they don't involve recruitment, they don't involve all the other different parts of the organization that are needed to make that user journey or that user experience as seamless as possible. And so therefore it falls at the first hurdle, because you're designing it as a learning experience, or a training exercise or whatever. If you start with that as your, I'm going to use the word of the month, if you start with that as your mandate, then you are going to you're going to fail, or you're only going to achieve a small percentage of what you need to do for that project. And I think broader topic, this comes back to why most HR and people teams, regardless if you create new ways of doing things, regardless if you're human centered or anything like that, you're going to struggle to design the things you need to do, because the structure of a HR and people team traditionally inhibits that kind of working. That aside, the live stream is called Induction and Onboarding is a Lie, because I think the thing we said in the early days of Freeformers, right, that when you join an organization, when you're in this probation period, it's like a trial. It's like a, in inverted commas, it's like a free trial. You sign up to a piece of software, you get your free trial, you decide whether you like it. They don't really decide if they like you. They just press the auto subscribe button and they like you because you start paying. But you're testing out the environment. You test the work, the thing you want to achieve. You're testing it out in that environment to see if you can achieve it in that environment. And at which point, you then have to make a decision about, do I want to continue the relationship with this piece of software? Has it helped me do the thing I want to do as easy as possible? And so when you design an organization like, when you design an onboarding experience like that, you end up in quite a different place. But I think most organizations use it as like, try to get that validation through, I don't know, rose tinted glasses. Like, this is the company you work for, and we once used to be a fishing company. That was Samsung. Samsung used to be a fishing company, and now they make TVs. But this is the history, this is the legacy, this is our CEO, this is everyone, this is some videos of people saying how great it is to work here. You've made the right decision. You've made the right decision. You've made the right decision. All of the things in Induction are priming you to kind of go, oh, I've made the right decision. I'm happy here. And validating the stuff you've seen on the career site. Now and what that ends up, and we talked about this just before the live stream, what that translates into is kind of unrealistic expectations of what it's actually like to work there. So we went back and we looked at a friend of ours who joined a company 1 year ago. And within the first 3 months, they posted on LinkedIn how amazing this company was 16 times. Since, they've posted 3 times. And I looked at it. They're not even actually posts. They're just reposts. Hey, we're hiring. Click this link. And so what you end up when you first join an organization is kind of this dream-like state where the world is amazing. And you're going to go, wow, oh, I'm so curious. And I've seen this and I've seen this. I've seen things I never thought I'd seen before at this organization. Then the work hits, and then you have to, you don't have time to post on LinkedIn. You don't have time to scroll through stuff because you've got the work to do. And so therefore, does induction and or onboarding enabling you to do that kind of thing, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Or just a thing?
It's just a thing. Yeah.
I don't know. It's good to, it depends whether they were pressured to post. Oh, now we've got a slot in our thing, in our training or our webinar or whatever. Now everybody go onto LinkedIn and post.
It definitely wasn't that. We've having looked at this person's post, they were like genuine, looking around the organization, going, I met this person, I met this person. Like, these were genuine posts to their credit.
Okay. So I don't necessarily saying it's necessarily a bad thing. Um, and it's not even a full sense of security because it's how they were feeling at the time.
Hmm.
I guess the downside is for anybody who notices, oh, this person hasn't posted in a while, like you did. Like, oh, actually, possibly because of the spamming to start with. You said earlier, I'm going to have to unfollow this person. So then you got to feel, oh no, I'm not hearing anything anymore. It's fine. And then it's like several months. Like, actually, what's happened to this person? Yeah, exactly. So I don't really know what I'm saying with that. That's really articulate. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. It might be slightly false representation, but things often are. Every company I've started in, though, like I haven't had time in my induction or onboarding period, by which I mean anything beyond day one. For beyond day one, it's been like, right, go, 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 fix this mess, sort this out, do this, do this. Maybe it's the type of, it's definitely partly the type of organizations that I work for.
Well,
So, what do you think?
well, you've stirred something, because I thought back, and I think we've talked about this before as well, but this is the first job I've ever had where I haven't been able to go, yeah, you know what, I'll phone it in today. I'll turn up, but I'm not going to really do anything meaningful. Whereas now, I've not had a day like that in the past 3 years. Like, I would like one, but I physically and mentally can't, because, company ownership and all that means you're primed to act and behave in a different way. And to expect your employees to do that is ridiculous, because
Nobody will care about your company like you do. Sorry.
exactly. And I think the
I
James
do,
Watts. Well,
because
yes.
it's my company too.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that for the audience. So the James Watts of the world, and again, he reflects on this, is that he would expect people to act and behave in the way that he did, and realize that is a very unrealistic and unfair expectation. Um, so then when you translate that to induction onboarding, if you've got days in your day-to-day role where you can phone it in and go, you know what, I'll do more washing today than I would ordinarily do when I'm working for home, or actually I'll start an hour late because I've got a call, I just won't do anything with that hour. When you get to induction, that's kind of amplified, because unless you are curious, like, I'm going to go root around the file system, which is like the last thing I would do when I joined an organization, was root around the file system.
Look, if I'm bored, time goes faster if you're doing something.
I would be pretending to do something. Like, I would do something that I wanted to do. Not anyway. Doesn't matter. We're different people, and we don't work in organisations anymore. Probably for the best. But you kind of have time to flitter away, and so, and I think that only happens in larger organisations. Certainly, even the smaller organisations I've worked with since, I've never had like a really relaxing day. Whereas in large corporates, any former employer out there, well, O2 and Curry's PC World Carphone Warehouse. I'm sorry, chaps. There was a couple of days where I just phoned it in. Chaps, that's not the right word. People, leaders, bosses,
Folks.
whatever.
Folks.
Folks is the word we use. So yeah, it's you want people to feel relaxed and engaged when they join an organization, but you then don't want them to feel like they've been slapped round the face with work when the reality sits in. So there's got to be this kind of, I'm not saying dump a load of work on someone on the first day, but almost dump a load of work on someone on the first day. Like, at least the expectation that this work is coming down the line, rather than, oh, we'll give you 3 months to wander around the office, talk to different people, go and see this, go and see that. I was trying to, yeah, I just remember joining organizations, and you just kind of go, well, and what else am I supposed to achieve here?
I find that it's because people are always so busy, because often hiring has been done last minute. And by last minute, I mean either somebody's left a role and that's why it's been made available and there's been no kind of handover period,
Mhm.
or more likely there's been a gap, or they've pushed it as far as they can before creating the role, because operationally and commercially hiring is hard and expensive. I think that the teams that are crying out for help, but they're so busy. That's the thing I've had. It's often that, people are too busy to get you up to speed to work with you. Other projects I've had, they've had that situation. They've literally just thrown me the place where we met. My first week, by the end of my second week, I was like working crazy. to try and fix something with a stupid deadline because they had messed it up. And they had some freelancers who were working on it. They're like, right, we've got somebody internal. You know the client because you have a previous relationship with them. That's why they hired me, I think. You have a previous relationship with them. Fix it.
Yeah, yeah. I just that previous that organization that you're talking about. I remember I got a box with my phone in and some stationery all branded. I was like, wow, I've never had this before.
I
And I was
didn't. I started 1 month before you or 2 months, and I did not get any of that.
well,
I did get a phone, I think,
because they
actually.
had one left, and they were like, well, Toby's joining in a month, so we'll save it for him. I don't know if that's the case. But no, I think the reason I got that is because the person who had it previously had left between you joining, and so I just got the person who's left
Probably.
one. They had a finite amount, but there's like, yes, I got that, and I posted a picture of it. But would I point at that and go, oh, it was a great place to work because of that? No, absolutely not. So it gives something for the organization because it gives like the kudos on social media because everyone will post a picture of that stuff. Oh, it's my first day and I got my bag of swag. Um, but it doesn't really mean anything in that moment. Like, I'll be honest, I, apart from our own branded merch, I wouldn't expect anyone to go around wearing like a Freeformers t-shirt other than probably you and me. And people who are close to it and people that genuinely love us. So quite a few. But swag,
But you
I,
wouldn't expect employees to do it. It's not like a uniform. The only time you'd expect it is if it's like at an event where everybody's wearing the same thing and it becomes a uniform. You don't
yeah.
expect anyone to do it by choice.
But the thing I would, the thing that's interesting, well, first and foremost, Jen Long O'Hare posted a comment when we said this was going to be this live stream topic and said, if you say that you're going to take away swag from us all, I'll hunt you down. And then her comment got taken down for inciting violence
Oh,
because of the
oh
phrase
dear.
"I'll hunt you down." And then Mike Brown also posted like, "Yeah, but we all love a good pen, don't we?" And so I don't know. Do we all love a good like? I think the world of creating lots of plastic tat to be given someone on the first day is kind of nothing more than it's got to be functional, right? It's got to have a purpose rather than just dumping a load of stuff on
I
someone.
have, okay, best swag I ever got was again the warehouse group. Funny, they keep coming up on this. They just gave us a bottle. Like it was a decent quality bottle. Mine lasted me traveling around with it for 6 months afterwards until I
Oh, nice.
eventually left it somewhere. It did have a few dents by the end. Like metal bottle, but having it there, I was actually just able to drink, like to properly drink. So that was the best thing I ever had. And I think I will say, most people like a good pen. Most companies do not give you a good pen.
Ah,
I think there's none of that. If you've got a decent like a pen and a notepad for a lot of people is actually quite good, but it has to be a nice one. And I need a blank notepad. I mean, we're getting into Emily's personal likes and dislikes here, but I need a blank notepad. Don't give me lines; it just stresses me out. And cheap and nasty is not where it's at.
imagine, but before you join, it's like, what swag would you like on your first day? What would you find beneficial? And you can pick 3 items out of 10.
Yeah, that'd be kind
That
of
would be
cool.
quite cool. Sorry, I was looking for my water pen because the water pens are really good. As are WeWork. WeWork did like cardboard pens, and I really like my WeWork cardboard pen. But yes, good pens. I got one for Father's Day. Are my family ever going to watch this? I got a screwdriver one for Father's Day, and but it's not a very good one to
It's
write
not a
with,
nice
so
pen.
it's just more for show. Um, but
But
so
who wants a tote bag? Nobody wants a tote bag.
no, I've got too
Like
many
we
already.
don't want a tote bag. We also don't really want to be shouting. Although I will say I use my husband's tote bag to wrap my speakers in because when I travel because I don't have a proper speaker case.
We
So
all need
that's
tote bags to a point. So
good
the thing
branding.
I want to end this live stream with is a potential idea that whilst you were talking, you're talking about someone leaving and then joining. That's the moment where there's probably an opportunity for the redesign of induction and onboarding here. Um, and what I'm about to propose is incredibly complex, and I can understand why you probably wouldn't do it, but I maybe have a mitigating thing you could do. Is that in an ideal world, person vacating role and person taking role up, there should be crossover, right? That's what you want. You want to be having that crossover, and you want the person leaving to be in such good spirits about them leaving that they do a good handover as well. Not this is rubbish and I don't want to do this. And you wouldn't do that in redundance, obviously, because you're making the role redundant. So if if you're making a role redundant, you're then doing a handover to someone who's taking your role over. There's a tribunal. Um, but what can you do in that situation, right? Because let's say you hand your notice in, there's a 3-month notice period. So therefore, you're on the clock to hire someone within 3 months, and ideally, you would want that to happen as soon as possible. So how could you incentivize someone to do such forward career planning that they might think, oh, actually, I'm thinking about leaving for this reason? And again, the psychological safety in organization is another issue here. That you are so upfront with where you're going in your career that go, I think in 6 months I'm probably going to leave. Is there any way we can start the, because you do it internally, you do succession planning internally, but it doesn't come out external. And I don't know what the thing I came up with in my head. So the answer, I'll go straight to the answer. The answer was, as soon as you hand in your notice, we will pay you for a 6-month notice period. But if you find and train up your replacement in that time, the sooner you do it, you can leave. So if you can find and get your replacement within a month, you get 5 months paid. If it takes you 6 months to do it, you've got you don't get the unpaid bit. I don't know. Like I say, like it's a completely ridiculous idea, but I think if we spent a day thinking about that, I reckon you could probably design a system that would help.
Yeah, well, you've also got to think about how a person feels in terms of security. Most people are not going to say hand in their notice until they've got a new job lined up.
Which is why I
And
say that.
therefore, they know what their note, and you can't give somebody a 6 months notice period because that makes their hireability for a new place much harder. 3 months is hard enough. Loads of people are 1 month.
So, but that's right. Like, the idea isn't fully formed, but I think if we really spent like a couple of hours stretching, I think we might come up with something. And then we'd have to pilot it, see if it would work. But sorry,
But
go
the
on.
point is, can you have some sort of handover in place? Is there something so that some sort of handover so that the person who's starting has the best possible experience, finds out exactly what it is they're meant to be doing? Yes, absolutely. In theory, if there is crossover, that would be fantastic. And I know that a lot of organizations are saying, oh, but you've got to pay 2 lots of salary at the same time. And how much time are you saving in terms of getting that person up
Yeah,
to productivity really quickly?
I think that's it. And if you built a system and process though that you're not relying on a manager, an L&D function, a HR function to deliver stuff, so
Mm.
you offset that cost by like creating a smarter system. The other thing, the other model that I have seen is that the people who are just about to join talk to someone who's joined 3 months ago and go, "Oh, this is what I wish I knew 3 months ago," kind of thing.
Yeah, like
Uh,
a buddy system.
but not a buddy system with someone who's been like a buddy system who's literally just been through this journey, rather than a
Mm.
buddy system. Go, oh, talk to John. He's been here 2 years. And like, well, John probably can't remember what it was like to be a new starter.
I mean, that's the best thing about a buddy or a mentor or anything. There should be someone who's not too far ahead of you so that A, they can empathize with you, and B, you can see yourself where they are in a
Hmm.
few months, few years, whatever it is time.
But the final thing I'll say, and then I will shut up, is that we talk about employment with an organization being a transient moment in someone's career. It has a certain lifespan. The issue is that most workplaces don't design with that up front from either party. No one enters that relationship thinking about when it's going to end. But we all know it's going to end at some point, whether it's nasty or good or whatever. And so, the retention piece is fairly arbitrary in a world that doesn't matter if you want to keep people as long as they can, they are going to leave at some point. So in what world can you design what world can you design where you get people come in through an organization and out an organization in the most efficient and effective way possible? We don't do that. We just kind of keep laboring on the old ways of doing things without trying to redesign the world of work. Do you have anything to say closing, Emily?
No, you summarized it very nicely.
Oh, I don't. I'm not usually the summarizer. I'm not great at summarizing. So okay, fine. Well, with that, on that bombshell, let's get out of here. Can you remember what the next live stream is called? He says in his best Norfolk accent. I just slipped
Is
slightly.
that a Norfolk accent? What's a Norfolk accent?
All right, my boy.
Sounds like a Bristol accent.
Well, let's not get into the ins and outs of the difference between the Bristol and Norfolk accent.
It's not in my diary.
HR, it's a good one. HR in the press, criticism, commerciality, and the changing paradigm. Again, well done,
Ooh.
Toby, for coming up with a very wordy title there. But we're going to talk about all the smack that HR gets in the press and whether it's warranted or not. And with that, we will leave you to the rest of your Friday, your weekend, and we'll see you next Friday on Freeformers Unplugged. See you later.